I tell people all the time that life is not easy, no matter who you are, no matter where you are. But I'm first generation born in the UK, so I'm not far from 60 years old. People look at me and they say, "What?" And I say, "Yes, I am." And the other thing as well, I really like to stress to people is about my hair. This isn't a fashion statement, and I will go into why I have no hair and why I wear my head the way that I do now. But growing up in the 60s, I was born in 1963, a very long time ago. My parents actually came from Jamaica, and they came on the Windrush, through that period, and they were told, or they believed that they would only be in the UK for 5 years. Well, obviously, 60 years later, they're still here, and I'm very happy to say that they're still alive. However, they never, ever got to fulfill their dreams, and I'd like to believe that I have helped them, to some degree, fulfill some sort of dream. So as I said, I have 5 brothers. I'm the only girl, and boy, was it a war. It was a war zone just because I was the only girl, but I learned to fight very, very early as a very little girl. But I didn't realize that that same fight is what I would need to enable me to get to where I am today. What do I mean by that? Well, you have brothers, they bully you, they beat you up, and it's just the normal thing in the household. But when you've got 5 of them, it's not really easy. So I've got this survival mechanism that saved my life on many occasions. When I went to primary school, I was extremely bullied as a child. And I'm talking about from the age of 4 until, even up until now. But bullying can be seen in so many different ways. So I went to school, and there was this little boy. His name is Stephen. And I remember going to primary school for the first time and seeing him thinking, I'm only 5 years old, right? I'm thinking, oh, he's really nice. I'm 5 years old. I don't know what really nice meant, but I remember feeling this warm sensation in my stomach because you're a 5-year-old child. You do have feelings. And I remember he always made me smile. Every time I saw him, he'd make me smile. And then one day he said to me, "Eryca, why are you crying?" And I said, "I can't tell you why I'm crying." He said, "Eryca, why are you crying?" And he put his arms around me. He said, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "Because the other girls have just beaten me up." And he said, "Pardon?" I said, "Yeah, they've just slapped me, they've just kicked me, and they've just spat in my face." 5, 6 years old now. And he said, "Why don't you fight back, or why don't you tell someone?" And they said, if I tell anyone, my parents would die. And I didn't want to be responsible for my parents dying, even at that very young age. Having 5 brothers, I wanted to tell my brothers, but I thought, as a 5-year-old, as a 6-year-old, my parents would die. And you can't tell anyone because your parents will die. So I've always had this heavy burden on my shoulders. Anyway, obviously I shared it with Stephen. And then I remember about maybe, I was a child, I don't know. I was going to say 6 weeks. It may have been 6 weeks. It may have been 6 months. As a child, time is time. But I remember Stephen saying to me, "Eryca, unfortunately," he didn't use that word, unfortunately. He said, "Eryca, I'm going to have to beat you up as well." And I said, "Pardon?" He said, "Yes, there's this group of us that nobody likes you, and I have to join that group." And I think that was the first time in my life I ever experienced betrayal. And that anger inside my stomach. But he said, "I want to promise you something." He said, "Just pretend when I hit you that you're in pain, because I'm not really going to hit you. And when I squeeze your skin, just scream so that the others could hear." And this is something that we did throughout the school. So they'd hit me, pinch my skin, and I was, ah! But at the same time, I didn't understand why he couldn't protect me. Everybody else would slap, kick, spit upon me, call me names. They used to call me Black Attack. They used to call me Bullfrog. They used to call me Big Lips. They used to call me Big Nose. They used to call me Black and Ugly. They used to call me Toad. And as a child, these things are so damaging. Even as an adult, they're damaging. But as a little girl with big plaits and big lips and beautiful big eyes, that would now start looking at herself in the mirror and start seeing this ugly person that everyone told me that I was. And you fall into that self-fulfilling prophecy. So for me, growing up was really difficult because I had a double life. I'd go home and I'd be this wonderful sister, wonderful daughter, really trying to make my parents really proud. And then I'd go to school and I'd be so sad. I'd feel so heavy. I'd feel so cumbersome. I'd feel so just ugly, you know? And I didn't realize that that was the beginning of what we now know and recognize as depression. I was so unhappy. I felt this pain in my stomach all the time and anxiety, but I didn't know it was anxiety. I didn't know that was the word. I'd always feel anxious and nervous and tearful when entering the school gate. And remember, I learnt to act really early. So my parents, poor them, they had so many children, you know, I'm being the only girl. My mum just wanted to make sure that my hair was decent and I always looked pretty in my sandals and my skirt and my blouse. She didn't really know what to look for. I just knew that our household was very noisy. So I'd continued throughout my school life being bullied, being ridiculed, being told that I was ugly. But when I get home, my brothers would tell me that I'm beautiful. My dad would kiss me and tell me that I was beautiful. I was really confused. I actually believed that I actually thought my family were liars. You know, your family invariably are going to tell you that you're pretty or you're beautiful. But I also didn't realize how important those words are to hear as a little girl. So I'd hear it in one ear and then go to school and be abused. Now I know it's being abused. So this carried on until I was about 11 years old. And then that's when you start to get ready to go to secondary school. And I was so excited thinking I'm going to a big school. I didn't understand the system. I just remember being told that you're going to go to a bigger school. So I was really excited thinking, I'm going to meet new people, have new friends. After that, the longest 6 weeks holiday, I then went to this secondary school, which was about 3.5 miles from my home, which is a long way as a child. Lo and behold, when I got to the secondary school, who did I see there? Those same girls that used to beat me up at primary school. So what happened, I really, really thought I'd gotten away with it, but I didn't. It became a normal, I think at the age of 11 or 12, I accepted that you do get beaten up, you do get abused, you do get called all the names. I actually became immune to some of the pain that I was inflicted. But, so sometimes I get really emotional when I think back to that little girl who had to survive. And so when I went to secondary school, during the lunch break, I literally surrender myself. I just give myself to them and, yeah, go on, slap, slap, kick, kick, spit, spit. They did whatever they wanted to do. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell a teacher. I found it very difficult to make friends because I didn't trust anyone. And I remember having 2 friends, Donna, I really wish I could find Donna now, Donna and Elaine. Oh, I'm getting really emotional. Ooh, 2 little white girls, Donna and Elaine. They were my angels. They would grab me and pull me around the corner when they saw other people coming, the other bullies coming. And they'd say to me, "You'll be all right, you're going to be okay." And they were my supergirls, my superheroes. But even they were afraid of the bullies, and they would say, "Don't tell anyone that we're your friend. Don't let anyone know that we're friends." So I had these 2 best friends in secret. So my whole life, my whole entire life became a secret. This is at 11, 12 years old. And then Elaine left. She just disappeared. I didn't realise that the family had moved, but as a child, she was just there one day, and the next day she wasn't there. And I really felt lost. I think that was my first time ever of feeling, it felt like a bereavement. It felt like she'd died. Anyway, there was this girl there by the name of Teresa, and I say her name always because she knows who she is. Teresa was number one bully. If there was a crown to be worn, Teresa wore that crown very proud. Teresa hated me, and I found out why later on, but she hated me. She would slap me, she would spit upon me, she would kick me in my private, she would hit me in my head. I'd go to get on the bus after school, she'd pull me by my shirt collar. I had really long plaits. She'd pull me off the bus by my hair, literally, and I'd be on the ground and she'd kick and everyone would be laughing. And I never fought back. I was going to say I didn't fight back because I didn't know how, but I really believe I did know how. But if I think of how I fought my brothers as a child, if I'd fought her the way that I knew how to fight, I probably would have killed her. I was conscious of that, so I took the beatings. And I never, ever retaliated. In our school, we had, it's really silly to have a pond in your school, but in our secondary school, there was a pond and it had tadpoles in there. Quite silly, I think. And there were some frogs in the pond and some tadpoles. And I remember her saying to me, one day I was walking past, and she said, "Why don't you go and play with your family?" And she pushed me in the pond. And everybody started laughing. And there was a teacher that walked past, and she screamed and she shouted. She went and called the headmistress. But by the time the headmistress had come, Teresa had my head down in the pond. I mean, she was literally trying to drown me. I'll say drown. I won't say the word that I was thinking of. And she was pulled off, and all the other girls were laughing. They thought it was really funny. And the headmistress grabbed her and pulled her into the office. And then they grabbed me and pulled me into the office. Everyone knew that I wasn't a fighter. And everyone knew what Teresa had, she had it in for me. The long and short of it is, the reason why Teresa had done that to me at that particular moment in time is because just a couple of weeks before, her mother had died and no one knew. And this came out in the headmistress's office. I actually overheard the conversation. And it was said to her, she was asked, what is it about Eryca that you don't like? And she said, she has a mum, she has a dad, she has brothers, and she always comes to school with clean socks. When I heard that, my heart sunk. And as much as I knew what she did was wrong, part of me forgave her. That's when I realised that pain, and this was at 14, 15, bearing in mind I've been going through this my whole life, pain is something that you just can't get rid of. You can't take a tablet, you can't have an operation, not that sort of pain. It remains, and it is a permanent pain. My parents were notified, they were told what happened. But again, because I was okay, no disrespect to my mum or my dad, especially my mum, they thought I was okay. And I thought I was okay. But there was something in me that hated and despised school. I hated school. I never wanted to go back. But you couldn't tell your parents that, especially in the 70s. You had to go to school. Being the only girl, they wanted me to be a doctor or a scientist or whatever it is that they wanted to be. But I remember really, really, really hating school and anything to do with academics. The other thing that I didn't share is that I'm quite a bright young, well, not so much young now. I'm quite a bright woman. I was an even brighter child, but I didn't know. Because I played such the fool, I learned by making other students or other children laugh, they would become my friend, even in that moment. So my school work suffered because all I did was wanted people to like me. So I tried to make everyone laugh. And by making everyone laugh, I became that bad child, as the teachers would call you. And I was always told to go outside and stand outside and face the wall. But it was only because I was looking for attention or I wanted to be liked. I didn't lack attention. I had attention at home, but I wanted to be liked, which is two different things. So I was very confused. You know, I never smiled. I was always miserable. But little did I know, it's called depression. And then I'd go home and I'd be permanently smiling and acting out, being this perfect daughter and sister. It got tired, it got boring, it became tiring, became heavy, I became very confused and extremely lost. But I found a way to survive. So at 17, my father said to me, would you like to come and work for me or would you like to go to university? Me? Go to university? Hell no. I said, no, Dad, no, I can't do any more education. I can't have anything to do with girls. I don't want to be around anyone anymore. So my father said at the time that he was just about to start a building company. And he asked me if I'd like to become his secretary. And for those of you that don't know what a secretary is, it's like a modern PA. That's what they used to be called back in the 70s and the 80s. So I do all of his typing and all of his estimates. Over a couple of years, my father and I started a property company. We were called Freemantle Builders at the time. And we bought one property, we did it up and we sold it. We did 2, we did 3, and this continued. And over a period of 5 years, we grew a massive property portfolio. Remember, this is the girl that was told that she was ugly, that she would never amount to anything, that she was inferior, that had a friend by the name of Stephen, that at the age of 5 or 6 that betrayed her, that had friends that disappeared, that no one liked, that couldn't look in the mirror, that couldn't string a sentence together, wasn't very good at reading and writing, was absolutely brilliant at maths, always knew her numbers. This was Eryca Freemantle that was told she'd never make it, even though I didn't know make it to what or make it where. It wasn't really important. All I knew was that my father was my life, my soul, my inspiration. And luckily for me, my father and I, yes, we were born on the same day. So I'm born on December the 2nd, and I share my born day with my father. So I'd always knew what it was like to be special to somebody. Happens to be my dad. So, you know, you'd have butcher and son or builder and son. In this instance, it was builder and daughter. My brothers all went off and did their own thing. And my father and I became buddies. And I didn't have to think about all that trauma that I was carrying. I didn't know it was trauma. I didn't know I was still carrying it. But I did know that I was angry. They used to call it miserable. They used to say, she's so miserable. But I really tried to be happy. But the only time I felt really happy and safe was with my dad. I could just be me. Okay, so this carried on for a few years, as I said, and we built this little property empire that had no strategy, no plan. We just did it, and we found that we were really good at it. And then one day, one grey day, I went into a petrol station to buy some petrol. I had a little mini Clubman back then. My father bought my car for I think it was for my 18th or my 19th birthday, as you do, you know, dads. That's what dads do sometimes anyway. And the next thing I knew, I woke up in the in hospital. But what happened, a lady came in. She lined her car up to buy petrol. She came out of the car. She went back into the car, by which time I'd walked over to the kiosk to pay for my petrol. She lost control of her car and put her foot on the accelerator. And her car then flew into my stomach, my legs, my chest. And apparently the kiosk shattered, and all the glass from the kiosk obviously ended up on the ground. But as I fell over, my face landed in all of that glass. And my body went into shock, and apparently that's where all of my hair fell out there and then. In that moment, most of my hair. The ironic thing about this is my father was across the road in the pub, and apparently in that moment his knee jerked. He didn't know why, he didn't understand. And someone said to him, "Some stupid girl has just got run over in the petrol station." And my dad said, "How can anyone get run over in the petrol station? That's stupid." He said, "Anyway, let me go and have a look." So my dad came out of the pub and he crossed over to the petrol station. And as he got closer, he could see the crowd. This is his version of the story, okay? And then he saw my car. So my middle name is Angela. So my dad calls me Angie. So he says, "Oh, Angie must be here." He saw my car, saw this crowd. So he said, "Oh, let me try and look for Angie." And as he got closer and closer and closer, he could see Angie on the ground. Now, the thing for me is that everyone had said I was dead. I could hear them all say, "She's dead, she's dead, she's dead." But I couldn't respond because I'd just been knocked out. This is what they call being semi-conscious. So I could hear, but I couldn't speak. And all I could hear, and to this day I remember, was my father screaming from the top of his voice and going on his knees, stroking me and crying and screaming and screaming. And I remember thinking, I want to die. I had all of that anxiety and that pain that I've been carrying. And I think if I hadn't heard my father's voice, I would have given up. But in that same moment, I didn't want to be responsible for my dad's pain. And I remember my dad screaming and crying and wailing. And I'm there thinking, I'm there on the ground thinking, I can't let Daddy down. I've got to get better. I've got to do better. I've got to stop my dad from crying. So I have to survive. I mean, I'm half dead on the ground and I'm thinking about I have to survive for my dad, not for myself, because I'd given up for myself. The next thing I knew, this is pre-mobile phones, pre-everything that we have now. But I don't know how, but I ended up in the ambulance, getting to the hospital. When I got to the hospital, which is King's College Hospital in South London, all I remember is another wail and another scream, another set of tears, and I could hear my mum's voice. Apparently, my left leg had been broken in 5 places from the impact of the car. And the doctors had said to my parents that they were going to have to amputate my left leg. And my father said, before you amputate her leg, you're going to have to amputate mine. Save her leg, save her life. Lo and behold, I'm here. I still have my leg, albeit I walk with a limp. But my mother, through fear, almost signed the documents to say my leg was going to be amputated. And my dad said no. So again, my superhero twice. So Dad saved the leg, saved the day. And 3 months later when I was in hospital, because I was in hospital for that long, my face was wrapped in a bandage, and the whole family came round because it was reveal day. And I remember the whole family was gathered around, my aunts, my cousins, my brothers, my mum and my dad. They were gathered around the bed. And I mean, I couldn't see that happening in this day and age now, but they took the bandages off. And no one needed to tell me that I was extremely ugly with that reveal, because it wasn't what people said, it was their body language and their eyes. My brother looked down, my aunt looked up, my other brother looked that way, my cousin, she just pretend she wasn't there. My mum, and I thought, my God. The only person that came up to me as I took the bandages off was my dad. And my dad came and he kissed me on my face and he wiped my tears and he said, "You are the most beautiful young woman in the world." I mean, dads tell lies. But when I looked in the mirror and I saw what they saw, I remember thinking about Elephant Man. For those of you that don't know who the Elephant Man is, look him up. I remember feeling like I was the Elephant Man's wife. No disrespect to the Elephant Man's wife, but that was the only thing that I could relate to when I saw myself. I went back home. I was at home for 2 years before I could learn to walk, before I left my house again. My hair never grew back. But the thing that I remember the most about that period is that everybody got on with their lives. For a moment in time, you are the attention to everyone, but life goes on and everyone got on with their lives. And I remember feeling this empty disposition, as if my heart, my guts, everything had been ripped out. And my father said to me one day, he said, "What are you going to do with the rest of your life? You're now in your 20s. You can't sit in the house. What do you want to do?" I said, "Dad, I don't know. All I do know is that I want to cover these scars on my face. I want to help people with scars." So he said, "Do you want to become a nurse? Do you want to become a doctor? Even a scientist?" I said, "No, Dad, I don't know." I didn't connect makeup, which is what I started to pursue not too long afterwards, with pain and camouflage. But I do remember in one of those history lessons that the teacher threw me out of, they were talking about the Egyptians and they spoke about mud and its healing properties. So I remember asking my dad to get some earth from the garden. We mixed it with water and we put that on my face. And as awful as it looked, it was my mask, it was my camouflage. And the more I did that, the more confidence it gave me, the more I was able to go to the shop. Bearing in mind, I hadn't been out for 2 years. I went to the shop, but one thing I couldn't do was smile, because mud dries and turns into clay and then it cracks. But it gave me this confidence for a short period of time. And then as time went by, I realized that my scars were becoming slightly less and less. I mean, they were still awful, but it's just like if you have a spot, you watch that spot and you know when it's healing. I could see a difference in my face. And then I thought, I want to do makeup. I didn't know what makeup was. I mean, it's not like it is now, where you have the internet, you've got magazines, you've got models, you're surrounded with makeup. As much as people say there isn't enough makeup out there for dark skins, back then there was nothing available for dark skins, and I'm quite dark. And my mum's about 6-7 shades lighter than me. She had a foundation. I put that on my face. Okay, I looked a bit odd, but again, it gave me that little bit of confidence. And then I realized it was makeup that I wanted to do. So I called my dad. I went into my mum and dad's bedroom and I said to them, "I'd really like to do makeup." My dad said, "Makeup? What the heck's that?" He said, "Beauty." I said, "No, I don't want to do beauty. It's too much hard work. It's scientific. I want to do makeup. I just want to slap it on." Anyway, in those days, there was a thing called a telephone box. I think they still exist now, but they were plentiful in those days. And my father and I went to the telephone box and we called, I think it was 191. And my dad just spoke to the person at the end of the phone and said, my daughter wants to do makeup. Can you help us? And then she said, oh, there's some phone books, yellow pages in the phone box. You can look through them. However, I can give you some names now. And I think she gave 5 names. And one of the names was Complexion School of Makeup, which is in Holborn. Now, I'm a girl from South London, Brixton. The furthest I've ever been is Vauxhall. So anywhere past Vauxhall in the 80s was far away. Anyway, they said it was in Holborn. My parents rang them up. We went to see them. And they told my dad, yes, we'd love to have Eryca come along and do a course. It's going to cost £13,000. £13,000 is a lot of money now, much less then. But what did my dad do? My dad got the £13,000. And my mum, I must give my mum some credit. They got the £13,000. They sent me to this complexion school of makeup. And I think that was the best experience of my life. Why? I was the only black girl. Everybody was from Australia, America, New Zealand. These were international students that could afford to do a course like this. But most of all, I was a very special student, friend, associate to them because they'd never seen a black woman before, much less worked on a black woman that had scars, had no hair, and that was very shy. So I became the student that everybody wanted to work on. Everyone wanted to do my makeup, experiment with my scars and my lack of hair. So in those 2 weeks that we did that course, yes, it was only 2 weeks, it was very expensive, I became international without leaving the chair. That whole experience made me then realize what it was like, potentially like, to be a model. And I decided there and then that's what I wanted to do. I did the course and I passed with distinctions. This is the girl that couldn't read or write properly, that was a joke, that was told that she was ugly, that had no hair, that didn't like women, didn't like people. And I passed with distinction. I found something that I really enjoyed doing. Within 2 weeks of leaving Complexion School of Makeup, I traveled the world. No, 3 weeks. And you're thinking, how did that happen? I don't know how it happened. But if my memory serves me, I was asked to do the makeup for an up-and-coming model. I'm not going to say who she is, but if you work out the dates and the time and the area, I went and I did this makeup. I didn't know what I was doing. I absolutely didn't know what I was doing. But everybody else loved what I was doing. And I got booked again. That was within 2 days. I was then asked to do the makeup at a shoot for a fashion show at Brixton Town Hall, Lambeth Town Hall. And I said, no problem, I'll go along and I'll do this makeup. When I went along to do the makeup, there was at least 56 women standing around. So as I walked through the door, everyone started clapping. I'm thinking, why is everyone clapping? Little did I know that the makeup artist that they had booked didn't turn up. I was supposed to be her assistant. I ended up having to do the makeup for 50 plus women that was 6 foot tall. Little old me didn't know what I was doing, but I figured a way out how to do all of their makeup in the short time that we had. They were all black women, so I was able to relate to the different skin tones and the needs and the wants. But I didn't have enough makeup in my little purse that I bought. So everyone chipped in and I was the chief, the assistant, and the makeup artist. Why am I smiling? Every time I go down this road and I think of this, I remember Bruno Tilley. Bruno was the man behind Island Records. I didn't know that. I didn't know who he was. But Bruno was there. He saw what I did. He liked what I did. And he gave me his card and he said, Eryca Freemantle, can you please call me tomorrow? We're working on a few productions and we'd like you to do the makeup. What's this man talking about? Anyway, the next day I go to the phone box, as you do with your 10p, And I called him and he said, Eryca Freemantle, I need to tell you that what I saw yesterday was outstanding. It was quite phenomenal. And I think that you are the ideal person that I'm looking for to do the makeup for a few up-and-coming artists. I said, okay, no problem, as you do. He said, could you meet me next week? We're doing a shoot. I went along to the shoot and there was a group of people there. And I have to share this with you because I think this is quite hip, actually. There's a group of people there. One was a white guy and one was a black guy. The black guy had locks and there was lots of other people behind. Anyway, they said to me, we don't want you to focus on the white guy. We need you to work on the black guy. Thinking, okay, all right. This guy then lifted his head up and pushed his locks. I said, I know you. I didn't really, but I knew him from TV. The group was Adamski. The guy was Seal, who we now know as Seal. And I became his personal makeup artist for that period because, one, I'm black, two, I understood his skin, and three, we both had no hair. So there was this thing, as much as he had the locks, his locks was thinning. As time went by, I became his makeup artist. And the reason why I said that and I told that story is because I then realized I'd gone through all what I'd gone through for a reason. My career took off in such a way that I can't even explain to you. I was traveling first class, I was meeting and seeing things that I shouldn't have seen, doing jobs, and it was mind-blowing. This was the girl from South London, that went to school, that was bullied, that was ridiculed, that was told she was ugly. But one of the responsibilities as a makeup artist and as a hairdresser is that everybody puts their situations, I was going to say problems, situations on you. And I found that I became everyone's agony aunt. Everyone was talking to me, everyone was telling me about their issues, and I found over a period of time, I couldn't cope, but I didn't know why I couldn't cope with all of their issues. And some of the issues are really, really big when I think back to it. And it got to the stage that one morning I decided to get up to go to work, and I realized I couldn't do it anymore. Little did I know that was my depression kicking in, and having all these people around me was triggering things about myself that hadn't been dealt with. And the more I had these people around me, the more things that I saw that I shouldn't have saw, the more I just felt really uncomfortable. So I decided that the career wasn't for me anymore. And I did that for about 5-6 years. I had to run away. But there was something in me that still loved that world, but I didn't know. Now, I knew I loved makeup, I knew I loved teaching, and I knew I understood black skin. And in the 80s, there was nobody. The only people that were around that I remember that did makeup for dark skin was Pat McGrath, who is still Pat McGrath. There wasn't that many people around, but I decided that I couldn't deal with all of the anguish and all the anxiety and all the things that I shouldn't have seen. But I wanted to teach and show other people what you could do with makeup and how makeup could make another person feel. I decided to go back to college, and I got a teaching qualification. And once I got that teaching qualification, I then approached London College of Fashion and said, I've done this, I've done that, I've been here, but I would love to be the first person to teach makeup here about people or for people of colour, so that the students that are up and coming and even the other staff themselves would learn about different skin types, different skin tones, and the psychology behind makeup, which people take for granted. How makeup can make you feel so powerful or not. They took me on board, and the next thing I knew, I was writing the courses, and I sat on their advisory board for many years. But there was something in me that it was never enough. It was never enough. It was never enough. Moving forward a few years, doing all of what I did, I loved it very much. But I needed to escape. So I then met someone, got married. But the mistake that I made is that I didn't get to know him. I thought I was old. I was 30. I thought I was old. I thought I needed to get married and have children, because if you didn't do it, especially in our culture, you know, you could be left behind. But I married someone that I didn't know, that I didn't want to know, and I didn't get to know. So the marriage didn't last very long. But I now look back at my life then and think, why was I so easily able to walk away from situations and people? That's because I didn't like myself. If you don't like or if you don't love yourself, you can never expect, or you should never expect, someone else to love you. You know, you can put on the lipstick, you can put on the high heels, you can put on the lip gloss, mascara, all of that jazz. But it's a mask. Because if you do not know, one, who you are, and why you love, or why you should love yourself, you've got no hope. And my industry is very superficial and very pretentious. And those of us that are in the industry, we know that it can be a big lie. It can be fantastic, but in small doses. It's very superficial. You've got to be made of something very special. After getting married and divorced, I remember feeling quite numb and decided to get back into property and move away from the industry. But the more I moved away from the industry, the more I wanted to be in the industry, and I had this battle. Anyway, the long and short of it is I decided to stay away. And as I stayed away, I realized I didn't like myself even more. And I remember one day getting in my car and driving down the road and thinking, I don't want to be here anymore. Now, somebody else would look at it and say, oh my God, you've got this glamorous life, you're doing this, you've worked with that person, you've got this property, you've got fantastic family, and all those things. But all of those things didn't matter. That thing that I felt, or I didn't feel about myself, that thing I felt in my stomach, those voices in my head that told me that I was never good enough, that you are ugly, I could not walk past a mirror and look at myself, even though I was in that industry. And I remember getting in my car thinking, right, today's the day. And I got in my car and I thought, I'm going to just drive the car into a brick wall. Next thing I knew, fortunately that didn't happen, but I remember banging my head on the steering wheel, just banging my head. And a lady walked past and she knocked the glass and she said, love, are you okay? And I looked at her and she, because I met her afterwards, she said she could see this rage in my eyes. The ambulance came. The lady called somebody else. I don't know what happened, but the next thing I knew is that I ended up at a mental institution. A family member was called, and my brother, being that family member, saved my life. He had told them that she'd just gone through a divorce, a breakdown, and she wasn't feeling very confident about herself. She wasn't feeling good about herself. He promised to look after me for the next few days. Now, I'm talking about in the 80s. This is not now. So how things worked back then, I mean, it's completely different to now. But my brother was able to speak to them and reason with them and took me home after a couple of days. And my brother never left my side. My brother told me that I said to him that I don't want to live another week. And he said, okay, sis, if you don't want to live another week, I'm not going to live another week. So let's get a kitchen knife and you stab me and I stab you, and then let the kids be parentless. The moment he said that, it made sense in my head. It triggered something that I wasn't right. There's something wrong with me. What it is, I don't know. What it is, I couldn't work it out. What it is, it wasn't for me to work it out. What it is that I need help. So my brother called a friend of a friend who's a psychotherapist, and he said that he couldn't do anything because he's too close to me, but he knew someone else. Eryca, you need help. Being told that you need help and accepting help, two completely different things. But because I knew that everyone was looking at me and what I'd just gone through, I said, okay, let me go and see this guy. I'll talk my way out of it. So then booked an appointment, went to see this gentleman. That was 18 years ago, almost. And I still see him to this day. However, that gentleman saved my life. He took me back, way back, beyond a 5-year-old. He made me talk about things that I didn't even know that I'd experienced. He took me on a journey that I didn't know was possible. Between the age of 4 and 5, I was sexually abused by a family member, and I had no memory, none. It had been buried in me so deep that I had no recall, none. It's only now that I look back and realize why everything happened the way that it did. So going to school, even before going to primary school, I had been violated, I'd been abused by an uncle, that it was our secret. He said to me at 4 years old, this is our secret, and if you tell your mum and dad what's happening and what we're doing together, they will die. Now, then going to primary school and the children saying to me, if you tell anyone, especially your parents, they will die. So since the age of 4, I've been carrying the awful experience of being sexually abused, but secondly, the responsibility of my parents' life. How the heck am I going to have the time, tenacity, the space to even like myself? So I now know why I allowed people to abuse me, whether it be verbally, whether it be emotionally, whether it be financially, because it was my norm as a 4-year-old. It was okay for you to do whatever you wanted to do or say what you wanted to do to me. It was fine because that was my safe space. That's what I knew. That was my default. When it came out in the counselling sessions about this man that had no memory, none. I was told that my body or my mind will react now that it's out differently. I didn't know what that meant. I just thought I'd catch a cold or, a bit of flu. I didn't know what he meant. But what he did say to me is that your body doesn't forget and your body stores. Still didn't make sense. About 6 months later, when it came out and I had to do all the work around that, and I had to talk about it, and I learnt to talk about it by going there and closing my eyes and remembering it all, which was absolutely awful. But then my body broke down. They say your back is who you are. They say your back is what keeps you erect. Well, my lower back My L5 and my L6 snapped. I went to get out of bed one day and I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. My daughter called the ambulance and the ambulance came, and I was then taken into hospital and they tried everything. They told me that, because I was very fit, they said to me, oh, it's the sports that you were playing, it's this, you've had an old injury. But for me, it just came out of nowhere. I then had to go and see another specialist. And this gentleman wasn't a specialist, the conventional specialist. He did things a little bit differently. And he said to me, have you been through any trauma recently? And I thought my whole life was a trauma. And I said, recently, no. He said, have you heard anything that's taking you to a place that you wouldn't want to go to? Now, even that question alone told me that he must have been in the room and heard what was said, or someone's giving him information. His name is Jason. And I said, yes. And I said, why did you ask me that question, Jason? He said, because the way you speak, the shape of your teeth. I'm a specialist. You've been grinding your teeth. After they did some x-rays, they were able to see that I've been grinding my teeth since I was 4 years old. We had gone into this safe place and I'd permanently be grinding. So the whole of my back tooth, and if you think about it, your jawline is connected to your neck, your spine. My trauma had got locked in my lower back, and the moment I released it, it became loose. And my body couldn't cope. And because it couldn't cope, my back snapped. Hence why I then had to have open back surgery. I now have 2 pins, a screw, and a cage in my lower back. Why? Because I was sexually abused at the age of 4. And if I'd found the courage, if I'd found the guts, if I didn't believe what I was being told, my life, I believe, would have been completely different. But I also know that I went through what I went through to enable others to realize that they're not on their own. So yes, as I started off, I said I'm nearly 60 years old, I'm 58. But because I've now shared my story and I talk to others about my story and my journey, I am now living my best life. Now, I don't want anybody else to have to wait so long before they share their awful stories. You don't have to tell people, but you can write it down. You can create a diary, but don't keep it in. Because one of the things that I've learned is that man that did that to me owned me for the majority of my life. And until the day I broke free, I had to now do the work. And I'm doing the work to the best of my ability, and I'm doing it very gracefully. And I'm not just doing it for this mature woman that you see sat here. I am doing the work for the 4-year-old Eryca that had no voice, no friends, and no one to talk to. But she survived. I survived. Not many people do. So when it comes to mental health and feeling different, feeling alienated, feeling lost, lacking direction, those voices in your head, the people that you surround yourself with, people that you talk to, people that you have as friends, the people that you interact with. One of the things that I've learned about life If somebody or something doesn't make me feel good or doesn't make me smile, I'm gone. But it took me nearly 50 years to learn that. It doesn't have to be that long for anyone else. There's always somebody out there. Be careful who you choose, but there's always somebody out there that can help you, that can support you, that can guide you. That's a snippet into my life, Eryca Freemantle. Very proud, Eryca Freemantle, for being able to share my story, my journey, my good, my bad, and my indifferent times. I'm looking forward for the rest of my life. But one thing I would say is you're not alone. You don't have to do it alone. I chose to do it alone because I didn't know any different, and there wasn't that many organizations or people around that you could talk to. But it's so different now. And that's why I make myself available. I put myself in that vulnerable place. And, you know, you see these tears, but they're not always tears of sadness. They're tears of joy. Tears of being able to set myself free and living my best life now. But it was very, very lonely and very painful. And it started off with one person violating me, then going to school, allowing bullies to bully me, becoming a teenager, allowing those same people to bully me. And by the time I'd got to my late teens, it was my normal way of living, except for when I was at home, when I had to be a really good girl. It was too much pressure. I was always going to break. But now I'm proud that I broke and I've mended. You too can do that with the right support. So where am I now? As I said before, I'm in a really good place, and it's taken a long time for me to get there. Everything I do now is about giving back. So as I mentioned before, I'm in the makeup industry, the beauty industry. But I needed to get away from the actual environment itself because I found it quite toxic. But I love teaching, I love giving back, and I am all about diversity and inclusion. And I found myself in the position where I am the voice for women of color in the beauty and the makeup space. So I created my own career. I am a global beauty strategist, and what that means is that I work with mainstream brands and I help them create makeup for women of color. Did I know that I was going to be pursuing these things? No, I didn't. But I never gave up. I was very consistent, I was very persistent. I'm about to now put on the first trade mission for the beauty industry to take mainstream to Africa. Now, Africa is a continent, and we're specifically going to Nigeria. And we're taking brands into markets that they never thought possible, to markets that they wanted to get into, but they didn't know how. Somehow, through this confusing life of mine, I've created a bridge for people to come together, multinational brands to come together, to have those conversations, to have that narrative and to be creative in this space. There isn't one way to do makeup. And as I said before, makeup is not about the application. Far from it. It's so much deeper than that. It's about the psychology, understanding the tones, the language, the food that people eat. Because you have one black woman who's dark skinned and you have another black woman that's dark skinned, doesn't mean that we have the same foundation. So I teach you about tones, hues, and all of those things that you probably wouldn't even take into consideration because someone's from Nigeria and someone's from Jamaica. Doesn't mean that the foundation that they use would be the same. So it's all about education, it's all about empowering, it's all about enriching, and it's all about hope. You know, I think it's really important that we surround ourselves with people that make us feel good, whether it be in our personal lives, whether it be in business. It's about feeling good. If you don't feel good, then nothing good can happen. You can walk around, you can pretend, you can mask things, but You have to be true to yourself. So it's taken me all this time to find and build my career, but I am at the happiest place. And I believe in communities. I believe that if you can find the right community, whether it be one or more than one community, that safe space that you can go to and you can speak to people about your truth and be transparent with your truth, then you are 60, 70% there. But the most important thing that I'd like to say is do the work for yourself. Do the work on yourself. Be honest to yourself. Anything or anyone that doesn't make you feel good, let it go. Do not be afraid to be alone, but don't be alone for too long. And just look in that mirror. Get to know yourself. Talk to yourself. Learn, understand every wrinkle, every line, every spot. Tell yourself every day that I am beautiful. Whether you believe it or not, the more you say it, the more it becomes truthful to you. I now know that I am the most beautifulest woman on the planet. Why? Because I believe so, because I've done the work. You'd asked me this question, I could never have made that statement if you even asked me that question a few years ago. I would have thought I was arrogant. I'm not arrogant. I just had to do the work to enable little Eryca to become the big Eryca, so that my daughter, my nieces, my family, my friends, my associates, they too, when they have a bad day, can feel very beautiful. Because beauty is whatever you want it to be. But the thing I do know about beauty, that it starts from within. It really does start from you. You've got to do the work on you. You can't expect others to do the work for you.